This old station
Council
leaves
ready?
anytime.
Shannon, you ready? John? Jerry, yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town of Woodfin regular monthly town council meeting. Today is Tuesday, April the 15th, and we're going to start on time at 5 o'clock today. We welcome everyone, and if you would, please mute your phones if you haven't already. Try to keep a little bit orderly. The very first thing that we do is approve the agenda. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
And we are doing a hybrid meeting, so we'll be doing a roll call tonight. Town clerk, Ms. Powers.
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
Young.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. The next item of business is a proclamation designating May as a celebration of public servants. Please bear with me if you would. Whereas the month of May is designated as a celebration of public servants, with May 4th through 10th being Public Service Recognition Week, and the 56th Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, May 11th through 17th, is National Police Week, and May 18 to 24 being National Public Works Weeks. And whereas since 1985, Public Service Recognition Week has honored those who choose to serve our nation as federal, state, county, or local government employees, and connect citizens with the government employees who serve them. And whereas building trust in the government is dependent upon the public's understanding of the role government plays in their lives, and the government's ability to reflect its understanding of the public's needs. And whereas it is through their dedication to public service that trust is rebuilt, communities are strengthened, and the public's needs are met. And whereas the office of professional municipal clerk is a time-honored and vital part of local government, one of the oldest among public servants. And whereas the office of municipal clerk is the professional link between citizens, governing bodies, and government agencies, serving as the information center on functions of local government and community. And whereas our municipal clerk spends her time recording the management of the town, including filling and maintaining records, preparing reports and presentations in the service of our community. And whereas law enforcement officers are guardians of life and property, defenders of the individual right to be free men and women, warriors in the war against crime, and dedicated to the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas it is known that every 57 hours in America, a police officer is killed in the line of duty, and 136 officers will be seriously assaulted in the performance of their duties. And whereas the Congress of the United States of America has designated the week of May 15th to be dedicated as National Police Week, and May 15th to be Peace Officers Memorial Day. And whereas public works infrastructure, facilities, and service are of vital importance to sustainable communities and to the health, safety, and well-being of the people of this community. And whereas such facilities and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are responsible for and must plan, design, build, and operate and maintain the transportation, solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to serve our citizens. And whereas the town of Woodfin employs 46 employees serving as public servants, including the town clerk, 18 sworn police officers, and 12 public works members. Now therefore, be it proclaimed on behalf of the town of Woodfin that the month of May 2025 will be held in celebration of our public servant employees, and we encourage our residents to share in honoring and recognizing the service of our staff. Thank you for your attention. Before we move on, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege and call attention that this is the last night that Councilmember Edgerton will be with us. He's taken a vastly more important job in another part of the state, and we just wanted to publicly acknowledge your service. I remember when we first decided to run and why we did, and it's been an honor to serve. And as a small token of our appreciation, we offer you this. We know you're a big hiker, you and your dog and runner. So we offer you this to go in your new office in the high rise with the corner office that you'll have. So best of luck.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is to approve the consent agenda. And Madam Clerk, I have two agendas. And as I made clear this morning, when agendas get modified, they need to be done by the council in terms of a motion. And the consent agenda being one that we hold close to us, it should be non-controversial. I'm not going to recognize the consent agenda with 8 items unless there's a motion and the town council approves adding that item. I think it's the right way to do it.
I have a motion to approve the agenda with the items.
With item 8, would you read it, please?
Item 8, the addition is approval of a contract with Withers Ravenel for professional engineering services related to Tropical Storm Helene damages.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam Town Clerk?
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
and Young.
yes,
And I just want to point out to council that there was a lot in this consent agenda. I hope everybody read it like I did. Kudos to the town staff for slogging through the complexities and the paperwork of FEMA and getting that done. We fully recognize how complicated that's been, and we also recognize what a great job Shannon and her team has done in dealing with that. Any questions about the consent agenda from council members?
No.
Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have multiple seconds. Town clerk, please call the roll.
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
and Young.
yes,
And just so the public will know, we're still in the state of emergency from Helene declared by the governor. And normally, if we weren't in a state of emergency, only council members present would be allowed to participate. But the state of emergency allows us to have council members participate remotely as we're doing tonight. But it does require us to call the roll so that we very specifically know exactly who's on the line with us and who voted a certain way. We now move into the public comment portion of our meeting. The public is invited to attend all of our meetings in person or view them on YouTube. The address is on the agenda there. And lately I have noticed our viewership is up. And all documents related to what we do in our town meeting are on the website. And if there's anything big, you can of course look at it here at Town Hall. I have several people who have signed for public comment. And I just want to clarify that there's a difference between public comment where you want to speak to the town council. There's a difference between doing that and addressing the flood damage prevention ordinance and the rezoning of the property. So if I call your name and you're here to speak for either one of those public hearings, let me know. Brian Newport. And if you would, when you come to the podium, remind us of your name and tell us where you live, please.
Yes, my name is Brian Newport. I've lived in Woodfin for 7 years. I'm married to Tina Jaffrey, who many of you know. And I was living in Asheville for 7 years before Woodfin. Retired last August after 13 years as a support contractor to the National Climatic Data Center, which is now the National Centers for Environmental Information in the federal building downtown. And the reason I'm speaking is I'm concerned about the likelihood of another flood like Hurricane Helene and the local government readiness for that. And I have to recognize the loss of life and property that happened, and that's what led me to this. So in January 23, I wrote a letter to our county commissioners, and the intent of this letter was to convince the county that improved ordinances and building codes are needed to reduce the loss of life and property in a future event like Helene. And the letter is 5 pages long, it has 18 references, most of them hyperlinked. The response was disappointing. Maybe I don't really know how to write a letter to elected officials, but it's a lot of detail in there. I'm a scientist, PhD in physics, and I've worked as a systems and software engineer the latter half of my career. So one thing I want to bring to everybody's attention is the concept of a flood return interval. So in the media after Helene, we heard terms like 100-year, 500-year, 1,000-year, and biblical. And when general members of the public hear this, they think, oh, this is once in my lifetime. But that's not what it means. A 100-year flood has a 1% chance of occurring in any year. That means in 2025, we could get a 100-year flood. And a 500-year flood has a 0.2%. So there's a 0.2% chance we could get a 500-year flood. As far as I know, Helene never breached the FEMA 500-year line anywhere that its line was defined. But the FEMA maps show 100-year and 500-year elevations, and I studied those in some detail online because I'm retired and I can do that. That the 100-year level was exceeded in many places by the flood from Hurricane Helene. So how does FEMA even know what these levels are? And so I'm not a hydrologist, but I know there are flood gauge data, and I know that FEMA use on-the-ground surveys. I also know there's only about 100 years of data from river gauges in Buncombe County. And then I also know that the FEMA 100-year elevation is called the base flood elevation, and it's the legal foundation for flood insurance, and it's also being used as the legal foundation for building codes. And the building code that FEMA was using was building 2 feet above the base elevation. I'm a scientist, so I know that when you make a measurement, there's always uncertainty. Then you have to do analysis and extrapolation and interpolation. And so there's a margin for error there of 2 feet. One thing about these flood elevations is that they change only slowly because they're a basis of law, so they can't change quickly or capriciously. They assume a stationary climate.
Sir, excuse me.
Yeah, have I used
a 3-minute limit? Can you sum up for us?
Oh boy, I tried to do all this in 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to jump way past. This flood, its return period is probably a lot less than 100 years because of climate change and because of inadequacies in the FEMA analysis. And in my letter, I speak to that quite a lot. I looked at the city of Austin, Texas, which I found in a newspaper article, and I looked at the Buncombe County ordinances for floods and compared some aspects of those. Austin, Texas has done a way better job than Buncombe County has with regard to flood. And I think this is not an exhaustive search across all areas of the country, but I recommend in the letter that the Austin ordinances could be a model for a Woodfin ordinance. I also point out the Woodfin is downstream. My letter was addressed to the county.
Sir, it might be a good idea if you're welcome to write members of town council. Our email addresses are online.
Okay.
I think we'd be happy to read your complete set of comments as well as the letter.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah, I'm glad to share it. I put a lot of work into it.
And updates for flood ordinance is also on this agenda.
Okay, well, yeah, I wasn't prepared for that.
You could fix it. Anything you see wrong.
Well, I'd be happy to review it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Ken Buckner. Mr. Buckner, what's your
Thank you.
address, please?
Address,
Yes, sir.
610 Godfrey Drive.
Thank you.
My name is Kenneth Buckner. I'm a lifelong resident. Of Western North Carolina, from Swannanoa, moved to McDowell County a few years back. And I commend you on your assistance in letting people know that their time's run out. And I've got this pretty well quick, be really quick. So thank you. And that gives me 10 or 15 seconds to sum up. A very bad day happened to me on October 7th. On October 5th, I found a red light out in Swannanoa after Hurricane Helene. It was a week after Hurricane Helene. And the traffic coming off of 40 was backing up. A red light was out. So I assisted. We did good on Saturday the 5th. Went back on the 7th and made it halfway through the day. Great. It worked out. And a patrol car pulled up and an officer got out and said that he didn't think I was qualified. And after about a 10-minute debate, I debated him, and diplomatically, and I had some frustration and such. But I gave it up, went to my truck to sit down, heading east where I'd parked my truck earlier to get out of there. And about the time I was sitting on the back of my truck. I gave the officer my name and number on the de-escalation, calming down, cooling down. I said, give this to Quentin Miller. I want you to have him call me whenever time it takes so I can tell him how disappointed I am being taken off of what I'm doing to help my community. Another officer pulled in, got in front of his car and started. He's a young officer, and I understood later on after researching him. And I said, well, I can't stand this staring him down. And I tried to get away from him. He said, why don't you do what officers do? And long story short, I said a 4-letter word. And boy, I got took down classic style. And I'll move forward. The officer who I originally had been talking to came running down. The end result was that perpetrated and propagated the scenario that I was resisting arrest. Stop resisting, stop resisting. I was already jacked up, man. He had me about folded up like a lounge chair. And I'm 70 years old. Never had 52 years of my adult life. I've never been in a fight. And but to cover up the police misconduct, the officer went to, and I asked him twice on the way to the detention center. I said, you know I didn't hit you. Got it right here, got it right here. Well, long story short, it's in the courts, having to rehire an attorney when the first one worked to do a plea bargain, and no, principle matters. So the gentleman that did that and went to the magistrate's window and committed a Class F felony perjury. If you got a uniform on and you throw public trust and your oath out the window, and that's the situation I'm in. I'm in the twilight zone, and so it's a
Summarize
it's
what
event.
you want to make to us.
Yes, sir. It eventually, I believe it's going to work out. I've changed attorneys, but the gentleman who's worked for 5 different law enforcement agencies, he committed a Class F felony perjury charge at the window that I'm battling, but I'm in a tough spot. His name was Christopher Morrow, and that's why I'm here tonight. Truth to power. Thanks for letting me speak, and you're a great moderator.
Take care, sir. All right, the last speaker, Mr. Ken Brame.
Hi, Ken Brame, 15 Morningstar Drive. I'm a leader with a local Sierra Club in Western North Carolina. And my story starts in December, I think it was 2020. And I got a call from one of the neighbors the day after Christmas about a massive new development that was going in across the river from Woodfin called the Bluffs. And so we organized and started looking at the ordinances of Woodfin. It was like, oh my gosh, these ordinances are so lax compared to any place else in the county. It was just amazing. And so we kind of continued to organize to fight that. In the meantime, we felt like there needed to be some changes in Woodfin. And so we recruited some folks like Hazel and Eric and Jim and worked with them. And by the end of the year, we had a whole new city town council in Woodfin, and amazing what's happened. You've got great new development ordinances, you've got steep slope development ordinances, and I could go on and on. But one of the people that I really want to recognize tonight is town council person Eric Edgerton. Eric was there with his sleeves rolled up and using his knowledge that he gained from the city legal and his legal background. And so, Eric, we want to recognize you. If you want to come up, I'd like to give you this. It's a award of appreciation from the Western North Carolina Sierra Club for all you've done for the town of Woodfin and protecting our environment. Thank you.
Here, you can do a minute and a half speech.
Trying to make up for some of the lost time.
Okay, is there anyone that intended to sign up and did not? Okay, great. We now move into presentations and reports. And who's going to introduce our guest? Ken? The Greenville people.
My apologies. I was looking at the wrong place on the agenda. I don't need to get up. The camera's on me. I want to introduce Mary Love and Carla Parvin. We have periodically in front of the council, invited folks to come and educate us on various building and construction methods and philosophies. I've known Mary for quite a while now, and she is a passionate advocate for green build practices. And along with her partner, Carla Parvin, who is very well versed in modular construction and associated things. And I just thought it would be a good little educational moment. And I'm glad they were able to arrange to be here. I'm going to turn it over to them. Get your listening ears on.
Well, thank you for inviting us today, and appreciate you taking the time to let us plant some seeds about sustainable, resilient building and attainable building. And there's two organizations that we would like for you to know about and interact with us. The Green Build Alliance has been around for 20 years, and it is all about green building, sustainable, resilient. And we have a new directory out that I'm going to leave that I would love for you to take and utilize that. And then the other organization is Carolina Real Estate Investor Association. And CREA is very interested in working with the council on just brainstorming ideas about resilient and attainable housing. And one of those things that we have as a resource is modular homes. And when I was talking to Ken, he was like, I'd like to know more about that. So Carla is going to give us a presentation tonight about modular homes. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to present, and if you have questions, please feel free to stop me. We can meet offline another time and continue the conversation. My name is Carla Parvin. I am a member of the Builders Association Blue Ridge Mountains. You've got the wrong thing. Okay. Well, it's the same course stuff. I did this presentation this morning with a different audience, but that's okay. And slightly different focus, but all of the core information is in there. Family and home. The family is the core of a community. And one of the things that I feel strongly helps a family and a community is to have a home. And so one of the things that, the modular homes can do is help us get more families into affordable homes quickly. So if you're thinking, what is a modular? This kind of gives you this first little piece. What is this modular thing? It's not a mobile home. Mobile homes are built to HUD standards. It's not a tiny home. No matter what the square footage is, tiny homes are built to ANSI standards, whereas modular homes and stick-built homes, traditional builds, are built to state and local building codes. That's why modular homes are such a strong option for insurance purposes, financial purposes, appreciation. They are the equal of traditional stick-built homes. The photograph that you see in the upper right is how the home site looks when the home at 9 a.m. on the day of setting the home. Then, let's see if this works. No, it does not. Okay, so then we bring in the first half of the home, we set it on the foundation. We then set the second half of the home on the other side of the foundation. So 6 hours later, you have a dried-in home, right? You have to finish it out, but you're not exposed to the weather, and your plywood and your rafters and everything's not getting wet, right? So that's one of the strengths of modular homes, is that they are built in a factory, delivered to the site, and then assembled very quickly, dried in, and it minimizes exposure to weather, moisture, any of those things. Once the home is set on the foundation, it takes anywhere, depending on how complex the home is, anywhere from 3 weeks to 12 weeks to finish it out. So It takes approximately 8 to 12 weeks to build it in the factory, then another 12 weeks to finish it out. So 6 months or less, you've got your home done. The company that I work with has some of the homes already ready to be delivered, so that can really shorten your lead time again. And we do have 4 units available now, and I have a list here if you want to take a look at them. So when you're building a modular, there's things to consider. Site considerations, preps, you've got to prep that site, build the foundation, then you coordinate the delivery of the 2 boxes and the setting of the home on the foundation. So your timeline includes, finding the site, prepping the site, putting the foundation in place, and putting it on the foundation, and then finishing it out. Well, the company that I represent does duplexes and single-family homes. I have built personally 8 modular homes and 1 duplex, those in this area, and we've built 1 in Winston-Salem. So I'm the rare sales rep that not only can help you choose the model, choose your options, et cetera, and get the home on order, but we can also, I've done it. Yes, ma'am.
The picture on the top, are those primarily dirt for basis, or are they concrete, or does that just depend on the site?
It's a standard foundation on a poured concrete footer with a cinder block wall.
Thank
And then on top of that cinder block, you put the sill plates.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question, clarifications. So one of the great things is, the homes are delivered to you 80% complete. Your walls are there, your joists are there, your roof is there. We unfold the roof, and bring it up and you bring the 2 pieces together, but the roof is there. So there's a lot that's already done for you. And you see in the corner down there what I call our value proposition triangle. The 3 legs of this triangle. Cost, the cost is 15 to 20% less. Speed, it's 6 or more months faster than a typical traditional build, but the quality is there. We have 2x6 walls. We have great insulation, great R value in the ceiling, the walls, and everything, and very well built homes. And that all comes together to deliver the value of modular homes. Yes, sir.
I hope I'm not confusing things.
Yeah.
Is this, the inspection process happens at the factory? Is that right?
The inspection process for the framing and the rough electrical, rough plumbing, that's all already in the house when it's delivered. So those things happen. You have typical inspections on your footings, your foundations, and then when the 2 halves are put together, before you can finish it out, you have a marriage wall inspection, which you only have with modular homes.
Right.
Where you have the 2 pieces and your inspector is looking to make sure that it's put together according to the specifications that engineering, for this home specifies.
But you're saving some time because
Absolutely.
they're inspecting the process
Yes,
by which they were constructed.
yes, absolutely.
Excuse me 1 second. For those of you, if you're cooking in the sun, feel free to come up to the first row and cool off if you'd like to. Go ahead.
Sure. And, I'll be free, ready to, meet with folks and explain the whole stuff in additional detail, because I know we have short time here. On the interior, same kind of thing. Your cabinets are in place, your fixtures are in place, your wiring is there, your walls are finished and painted. So there's a lot that's complete. Your bathtub is in place, your shower's in place. Your windows are all in place, your mirrors on the wall, your fixtures are on the wall. So really shortens up your lead time by doing all of that. This gives you a look at comparing modular timeline with stick-built timeline, and you can see that the place where you really gain, you shorten your time, is that your site prep and your factory construction are stacked. That's your purple box and your green box there. They're stacked, whereas in the bottom area for stick-built rather, you have to do your permits, your approvals, your site prep. only once your site prep and foundation is done can you even start on your construction. So that's where modulars help you shorten that timeline. And it gets you to your certificate of occupancy quicker. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to mention where this all started for me was going down and seeing a modular apartment going down somewhere off the South Slope and watching them just lower the things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Second and third story up, and I was like,
Yeah.
that's got.
There's a lot of,
Well, that was your first apartment, wasn't it? You're a veteran of the modular.
Just like any other condo building.
You live there? Yeah.
modular home is built in 3 phases. You select your structure, you find your land, prep that land. Once the foundation is ready, you bring your 2 boxes in, put them on the foundation, you finish out your construction, and you move in.
This is a better picture to give you the idea of what the crawl space looks like
Right,
with
yeah.
the vapor barrier.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, this one is the one that we built in Winston-Salem. And the picture on the left is showing you 1 box is already in place. You're seeing the crawl space, like you were saying, Mary, with the foundation there. And you see the crane bringing the unit, the second unit over and getting it placed on that foundation. It's almost magical to watch those boxes. So, yeah, I enjoy it. So, as I mentioned earlier, cost is 15 to 25% less than comparable stick-built. Financing and insurance comparable to stick-built. Your property appreciates. As for lead times, 8 to 12 weeks from the time you order it until the home is delivered to your site, and then anywhere from 3 to 12 weeks to trim it and finish it. The pictures that you're seeing here are from Henderson County, Hendersonville. And the upper picture is a friend of mine. His home had to be gutted and redone because it was flooded. And across the street from him was the photograph that you see on the bottom. The house on the left had to be taken down to the studs because of flood damage. Over on this side, there had been a rental home that had to be demolished because it was so heavily damaged. These folks, and Western North Carolina folks in particular, are very resilient, very tough, very determined folks. These people are living in that little travel trailer there while they are finishing their home and also building a modular duplex. So they lost 1 rental unit, they're building back 2. I'm honored to be able to help them with that recovery. This is a list of the ready-to-roll homes that we have available, and I've got that if you want it. Well, you've got it on your presentation. This particular picture is a Piedmont that was built on a basement out in Madison County. So, yeah. And you can do a lot with them. This one we put, decks around 3 sides. You put it on the basement, put 1-car garage in that basement. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, or you can keep them very basic, very versatile. So there's a floor plan for that Piedmont. This is one of our best sellers because it checks a lot of boxes. You've got the master suite, and then you've got, the split floor plan where you've got the 2 bedrooms on the other side. You've got a nice big laundry room. You've got, a kitchen, open concept kitchen. And this particular one has been stretched 4 feet. The normal Piedmont is 44 feet long. We stretched it 4 feet so we could put the stairway in going down to the basement. We can go the other way. If you want to, our typical standard roof pitch on these homes is 512. If we can do 712, if you want a little bit different look, we can also do 912. And when you do 912, then you can finish off that upper floor. The buildable space is 12 feet long and the whole length of the building. We've got one of those under construction in Black Mountain. I've got pictures of it here later. So if you're interested in going and looking at that, be glad to take anyone out there and show you as it's being constructed. This is a picture of a Piedmont 1. This one is in Swannanoa. Thank goodness we had no water damage. So if anyone would like to see this one, I can take you out there as well. This one is on the market. This is the one that I was telling you about. That is the 912 pitch, and we've got the upper floor that we're finishing out. So this one will be a total of right at 2,000 square feet. This one, we can customize these, the interior floor layouts and stuff. We can customize it quite a bit for you. We took that Piedmont floor plan that had the 2 bedrooms and a bathroom over here. We turned that into another master suite and a powder bath. And then upstairs, we're putting in 2 additional bedrooms and a bathroom. So we can do quite a bit of customization for you. So to build it to the way that you want it. And that's the upper floor. I did have the floor plan for the first floor, but in the translation, we lost that one, but that's okay.
Carl, where is this particular manufacturer located?
They are located in Boydton, Virginia, which is about 30 miles east of Danville. Yeah. This is another one of our popular models. This one is what we called an in-load because the narrow face is towards the road. So if you've got a more narrow lot, this one is 28 feet wide and 56 feet long, fits on a more narrow road, a more narrow lot. This is the duplex. This is the larger duplex. This one has 2 bedrooms, 2 baths. So this is a look at the interior of that one that's built on the basement, showing some of the upgrades and some of the standard stuff. It's got the pantry there in the kitchen and 36-inch wall cabinets and various other things. Bathroom up there, master bathroom, and the master bedroom, dining room, and the basement. Right? Just to give you an idea of what you can do with these units. 3 phases. Choose your floor plan, choose your colors, choose your options. There's different ways to customize it.
Paul, can you go back to that picture just a minute? I just wanted, I've asked her to put a picture, actually the factory, so you can see. One of the advantages is you save so much lumber material too, and plus they're very clean and dried in. So just wanted you to have that visual.
Yeah. One of the great things is, the same people that are building the wall on this home are building the wall on this home. So they know their jobs, and they know exactly how much lumber they need. And when they, have a 12-foot board, they cut it in half, they can use that other half on the next place. So very little waste with modular building.
I want to state the obvious here. So sorry if you already know this. We had a housing shortage before this storm. That didn't help us. So the ability to generate housing quickly is really important. Doesn't necessarily mean this is the only way, but it is one of the really viable ways for making, we're playing catch up for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. And I have talked with my company, and they have committed to being able to produce 30 units for us before September. So if we are able to move forward, we have the capacity to do so.
How are we doing on time? I don't want to cut anybody off. But,
No,
okay.
it's,
Okay.
So be respectful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can do 2 hours on this stuff. Just let me loose, but let me know when what we're on
I
time.
have to reel you back.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Let's see. Phase 2, some of the things that you have to consider for a site, because not all sites are suitable. There may be things like power lines, large trees and roads. Is the road wide enough? Are there small bridges? Because we have to get the crane across the bridge. We have to get, the units across the bridge. Some zonings will not allow, modulars. And there are a lot of HOAs that, do not allow modular. So you just have to be aware of that as we are looking for sites on which to build. And then phase 3, you set and finish the modular. So this gives you another look at a crane moving one of our sections onto its foundation. And when they're both there, this is what it looks like. And the roof folds up, the eave will fold down. The marriage wall is there in the middle. That's what it looks like that afternoon, after being just a foundation in the morning. So what are the costs? And what kinds of things do you need to know about for these? With this, and I can send you this spreadsheet. This is our brochure, gives you a look at various floor plans, and on the back is a list of standard features, And in there, I have this on this blue sheet, and here's your list of tasks that need to be done so that you can gather your costs. So before you even start on the project, you know what it's going to cost you. I've done 8 of these. I can give you some ideas. I can, the folks that I work with to do the build outs and do the set of the homes, we can get them to do, other jobs for us. So this is just a list. And when I started this in 2020, nobody could give me this list. But I'm an analytical kind of person. I can't go forward with the project if I don't have a clear understanding of what's going to be entailed in that project. So I made this list. So that was the costs for the structure and for the land and prep. And then this slide shows you the tasks associated with the construction of the home and setting the home on its foundation.
Could you, as you summarize, could you give us a comparison of cost for this versus a stick built in general terms?
It's generally 20% less expensive to go with the modular. Yes. And, contractors or, homeowners that can do a lot of that work themselves, they can get even better savings. So, and then on the other side of this blue sheet, I'm sorry, did that answer your question fully? Yes. Okay. On the other side of that blue sheet is this, talking about the process of putting together the modular home. So you choose the home, you do your land and your prep, and then you do the construction of the home. And I've got this as an Excel spreadsheet. I can send it out. So, yeah. And I think that's the end. Yeah.
Questions from council?
It's good information. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I have one question.
Yes.
Does anyone know about the relation of this product to our Woodfin ordinances?
It's treated like any stick-up home, so it'd be exactly the same.
Okay. So there aren't obstacles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Next will be the town manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. So beginning with our Tropical Storm Helene recovery update, we continue to work with our FEMA public assistance partners, and we have 2 contracts for professional services to be approved. Actually, you already approved one of them on the consent agenda. And that is for services to do construction drawings and construction permits for Silverline Park. So that would be the renovation for Silverline Park. So that's good news. I hope that we can get those moving along so that we can put an invitation for bid out to get that park renovation started. And then the others for engineering, professional engineering services for repairs to our roads and stormwater system. We also are working on adjustments to our Riverside Park public assistance application to align with our current master plan. So we don't necessarily want to put back exactly what was there before, because our master plan actually proposes a new pavilion. We do away with the gazebo, and there's some other modifications. And there is a path to do that through the FEMA reimbursement process. We just have to adjust the application to kind of make it clear that we're not putting everything back, but that we are going to be reimbursed for those costs, and then we'll be able to fold them into the new pavilion. We have also completed the emergency bank repair in Silverline Park. It is a 4 to 6 foot boulder toe wall. It actually looks, it's very attractive, and it's much stronger and should help withstand the erosive action of the water movement through the stream channel or the river channel. And then the Riverside Park mitigation projects, we're also working with our FEMA partners on identifying those. The FEMA public assistance process does allow us to not just build back, but build back a little bit better. And it depends on the kind of feature or structure that's in the park and exactly what you want to do. For us, for for Riverside Park, what is most practical is the boulder wall itself is a mitigation project because it's not exactly what was there before. We had an earthen bank before, so this is a different feature. And then also we're looking at doing some additional improvements to the restrooms that would wet flood proof those restrooms. So we would elevate the water meters, the electrical, and then also replace some of the materials with water resistant or waterproof material. So instead of sheetrock, we would use a different material for the walls and things of that nature. And it would be designed in such a way that it would allow floodwaters to move in and then just recede back out. Debris removal, we continue to have a lot of activity. Silverline Park will remain closed for the time being to facilitate the debris removal that's planned in the French Broad River. We hope that will start soon. The final private property debris removal application intake day is scheduled for this Wednesday, tomorrow, April 16th, and that's a drop-in anytime between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. We had actually tried to wrap up the private property debris removal intake a little while ago, but unfortunately, Buncombe County's communication inviting people to apply didn't specify that was only for unincorporated Buncombe County. So a number of Woodfin residents had gone to Buncombe County to try to apply. So we worked it out with our intake specialist to add one more day. They wrapped up their process yesterday. So hopefully this will capture everybody who's remaining. We also have been working with our FEMA and state partners on how to approach some of what we are now designating high-risk private property debris removal sites and identifying which of those properties are high risk. So these are most commonly very steep properties with quite a lot of debris that is difficult to access. So the approach to remove the material is different, both because of the accessibility or the inaccessibility of the material, but also because the potential hazard that is posed to properties that are below the material. So they have to be super careful. The unfortunate thing is that this approach, the equipment needed, the approach, how to do it is not included in the state-approved contract. So we are more than likely going to have to separate out these properties and treat them as a separate contract. The good news is the FEMA and state partners who participated in the meeting, we actually met at one of these high-risk sites. They got to see and observe firsthand what we were dealing with. They had no doubt in their mind that these properties were eligible. It was just how to approach it. That was the subject of our conversation. And we're going to separate those out so that we can move forward with the non-high-risk private property debris removal work while we work out the details for these other properties. Also, the debris site that is currently located at the town's athletic fields, the soccer fields that are below the community center, that is to be closed this week. They're wrapping up the operation there as they've shifted the debris removal site to a different location. They're bringing in special equipment to split the stumps that have been collected. That requires a special piece of equipment. But once that's done, they said there isn't a lot of that, so they expect that they hopefully will be able to wrap all that up this week, and then they will reseed the soccer fields. They will grade and reseed the soccer fields. And we did specify an athletic field turf appropriate grass seed mix. So they said that would be fine. And then lastly, we're working through the punch list for the right-of-way debris removal. The contractors have completed their right-of-way sweeps, and so now we're just kind of doing the sites here and there that they've missed, or some people may have actually just put out a little extra material, but if we can identify it, we'll have them go back and get it. So hopefully that will be wrapping up soon. The news this week, something new, or excuse me, this month, is the long-term recovery plan that's being initiated by Buncombe County. This is something that has been discussed loosely since the beginning of the storm, that some sort of regional recovery plan would be needed. And we think it's appropriate that it be a regional plan and that we don't have 7 different local plans. This particular disaster affected a large area in Western North Carolina. I think it's very appropriate that we look at it regionally. It does tend to be county separate, even though our region is more than just Buncombe County. So Buncombe County will be leading our effort, and all of the municipalities have agreed to join this, and they will be participating. And the way the plan will be a countywide plan, but there will be sections that will be specific for each individual municipality. So Woodfin and the others will be able to identify what are our highest priorities and have those included in the plan. That will include a number of community engagement input sessions. Anybody can attend any or as many of these input sessions as they like, but we do think it's important that if we're going to have a Woodfin specific section of the plan, that we have our own Woodfin specific input and engagement opportunities. So once Buncombe County sets that schedule, we'll work with their project manager in figuring out when is appropriate time for us to schedule that event. The goal is to complete the long-term recovery plan by the end of September 2025. They really want to do this on the 1-year anniversary or by the 1-year anniversary, have a plan in place within 1 year. And as I mentioned, Buncombe County staff are working on that schedule now. And when we have more detail, we will be pushing this out on social media and on the town's Facebook and other media outlets. So that completes my hurricane recovery update. And if there aren't any other questions, I'll move on to our general update. Okay. So beginning with administration, reporting on contracts that have come in the last 30 days, we've had 4. One is on your agenda under new business that we'll be talking about here shortly, which is the contract for Code Right Planners LLC. It's $176,000 for a comprehensive development code update. So this is something that the town has been discussing for several years. And with the adoption of the Woodfin comprehensive plan and also in light of the hurricane disaster, this has been prioritized. It has come in under budget, so it's good to have that moving forward. We also have a contract with CERT. I forget what CERT stands for, something environmental remediation something, sorry. And it's in the amount of $24,778. That's for storm drain clean out. So we have gotten bids from various contractors to vacuum and clean out all of our storm inlets. We reported that on that at our last budget work session. And so here's the contract to get that work started. Equinox Environmental, and I'm sorry, that is not the correct number. It is, can you tell me? 48,752. That is for professional services for Silverline Park. That is the construction drawings and the permitting that we need to get that renovation project started. And then Withers Ravenel, a contract, it's a not to exceed contract. That's the engineering services for our roads and stormwaters. So the last 2 are storm related contracts. Those will be covered through the FEMA public assistance process. So those costs should be covered by our federal partners. Other work in the administration division includes, we developed a staff strategic plan. This has an internal focus. So just like council has a strategic plan, we thought it would be good for our staff to develop a plan for what are some of our priorities for the coming year in terms of how we operate and conduct town business. So it's really focused on efficiencies, work environment, things of that nature, employee recognition. There have been a great number of hurricane recovery meetings, not just our weekly FEMA meetings and debris meetings, but also other sort of larger stakeholder group meetings. Last week, the mayor and I attended a recovery meeting that's hosted by the League of Municipalities, as well as the North Carolina County and City Managers Association. These have been wonderful. I often get new information at these meetings as to what to expect. There's one of these meetings that I learned about the bridge loan program that Woodfin's been able to take advantage of. And at the last meeting, they mentioned that the state is looking to help municipalities with the cash flow issue with fronting some of these repairs. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but I've heard that now in multiple venues and coming from our state partners directly. So I feel confident that something will be coming, and more detail on that soon. And then lastly, this is budget season. We're continuing with our budget work. We completed one budget work session just last week, and we have another one coming up where we'll be talking about expansion budgets. Moving on in planning and public works. For the planning department, the code update work, assuming the contract is approved, will kick off at the end of April, early May. And that is a 16-month long process, so we want to get that started. The flood ordinance is drafted and is also on this agenda for one of your public hearings. We have 2 CZ applications in review, one again on this agenda, the other to come next month. And then lastly, the Landscape and Open Space Subcommittee is to wrap up their work in May, and hopefully we should be bringing a zoning text amendment before the council after that. And then for parks, or for Public Works, the Public Works staff have been working on reopening our parks. They've done some kind of refreshing that they do every year, new mulch, new sand, grading the scraping and grading the gravel, things of that nature, opening the restrooms. Unfortunately, when we opened the restroom in Roy Pope, we discovered a plumbing issue, so we had to close that. So we're working on getting that restored. And then we are preparing for brush removal to restart as FEMA wraps up their right-of-way debris removal process. We're going to pick up our just regular brush collection process. But it's important to note that we're not really set up to collect trees or really large material. This is just, it's probably going to take a little bit of a transition education process with our community to kind of get them back to just doing regular sort of spring cleanup debris. For stormwater and parks, beginning with the stormwater division, they have completed the impervious surface analysis, and that's something we're going to have to do every year, and that is what helps set our fees, and that is part of the budget discussions that are occurring right now. We're also working on I didn't know what to call it. I called it Keep Our Streams Clean, sort of public notice. We're not sure yet if that's a letter to property owners that have streams across their property, or if that's more of an informational pamphlet with guidance and information asking people to try to keep material out of the creeks and how to keep them operating properly. But we're working on something that we'll share with those property owners. And then for the Parks Department, the Riverside expansion project continues to move forward with the fill removal and work on the Coffer Dam. Silverline Park, the permit and bid documents that I mentioned earlier, those are getting started. And then Geneva Main Community Garden, the final site work is to be completed, which is really, I think, just bringing in some mulch, and that will be ready to go. And then lastly, Roy Pope Park, in addition to that plumbing repair, we are looking at replacing some of the playground equipment. Unfortunately, some of that equipment appears to be obsolete now, or the original equipment. So we're having to try to find comparable products with other vendors, and so that's part of the delay. And then lastly, in our police department, our new detective is to start this coming Monday, April 21st. So we're very excited to have a new member of the police department join us. Filling the SRO is still expected. Our plan is still to fill that before the start of the next school year. So that recruitment process is moving along. And then we are actively recruiting for patrol officers. So we do still need one patrol officer. And so we're hopeful that our new marketing materials and other efforts will come to fruition here soon. The Woodfin 5K is scheduled for Saturday, April 26th, though police have been working with the Woodfin Elementary 5K steering committee on they're in their final plans, and the closures and other information will be posted on the town's social media. So we want to make sure members of the public know what to expect in terms of road closures, and just not really road closures, but having runners on the road, just so that they're aware. And then our police department put together a really great video that we posted both on the police department Facebook page as well as the town Facebook page, just explaining the park closure and why it's necessary and what we hope will be temporary and that will reopen as soon as possible. Just trying to kind of help people understand and know what to expect moving forward. And that concludes this month's update.
Questions from council?
No, sir.
I have one question
Yes, sir.
on the police statistics report. I was in February, on March of 25, the label misstates, we had averaging 31 inbound calls a day for service.
I'm going to invite our police chief. Is your question, is that the accurate number or is it?
Is that typical for a town our size?
So it's not just inbound calls, that includes self-initiated activity. So every traffic stop, every business check, every security check,
So
every
that
time.
includes the proactive
Correct.
activity.
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's a huge difference. And I don't want to take time to do it now, but if you could perhaps do it in an email, explain how you calculate crime rate. Notice there was a huge difference between February and March. I'd be curious how you calculated and what some of that means.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Shannon. We now move into the section of the agenda, new business. And the first item, are you going to do this? We just completed the very first town manager performance plan. We did it through a subcommittee of council members. We don't want to go into a whole lot of detail about it, but we did want to let the residents of the town know that it was a fairly extensive process. Everyone participated, and unless I'm missing something, all parties were pretty satisfied with how it went down.
That's great.
Is that okay? All right, good. Perfect.
And I'm still employed.
Okay, second item is approval of the contract with Code Right Planners for the update of our land development codes.
Thank you, Mayor. So moving forward with this next new business item, the Section 6 of the Town of Woodfin's purchasing and contract policy requires that any contract that is over $90,000 or greater has to be approved, that is in the amount of $90,000 or greater has to be approved by the governing board. So that's you all as town council. So any contract either has to be approved via consent or via a separate motion under new business. The reason we're putting this contract under new business rather than consent is partially because of the breadth of the contract, the size of the contract, and also what it involves. There's a fair amount of public engagement involved in this. And where this is coming from is that the town has a number of different development codes that predate 1995. And before 1995, they were sort of separate. You had a zoning code and you had a subdivision code and maybe you had a animal control code. And in 1995, there was an effort to sort of pull all those codes together into a single code of ordinances document. So that was the last time the town did a full comprehensive look at development codes, as well as other codes. There have been, over the last 30 years, there have been numerous amendments to the development codes, and it's resulted in various inconsistencies between sections of the code. So in one section, it may refer to one process, and in another section, it may refer to the same process, but it's different, slightly different. And so it creates some confusion and ambiguity. And then also in some instances, it's even inconsistent with state statutes. So we definitely want our codes to cross-reference all of the sections appropriately and then be in alignment with our state statutes. We also adopted a comprehensive plan in 2024, and that sets forth a new vision for how the town chooses or wants to grow and develop over the next 20 to 30 years. And it is very common and typical and appropriate, it's considered a best practice, to then look at your development code and see what needs to be adjusted in order to help make that new comprehensive plan vision a reality. So we're in a good position. We've just adopted that, and it's been 30 years since we've done a big code update. The town council set aside funds for this express purpose in the 2025 fiscal year 2025, and an RFP was issued in early 2025, and Code Right Planners LLC was selected through a competitive process. So that contract is for a total of $176,000. It is a pretty extensive contract. It has a very detailed Appendix A, which describes the scope of services. It breaks it down into 8 tasks, and I've listed those 8 tasks on the screen. And then within each task, it describes in detail what kind of activities will support that task or be necessary to complete the task, and then what we can expect the consultant to do, what town staff's responsibility is, what the steering committee's responsibility is, et cetera. The contract also includes a proposed schedule with a goal timeframe for each task for a total, if at the end of those 8 tasks, it's about 16, 17 months from the launch to adoption. And then there is also included in the contract a compensation schedule that breaks down compensation per task. And that has actually been super helpful because a contract of this breadth that covers more than a calendar year, it's going to spill into another fiscal year. So knowing which tasks are going to incur in this fiscal year versus next fiscal year and how much we should budget for those additional tasks is very helpful. So we're able to make that adjustment for fiscal year 26 and just roll that funding into the next year. The project will also include a fair amount of public engagement. And that's going to be in a variety of forms. And we don't even know yet what all of those forms are. There's going to be an opportunity for the steering committee and other stakeholders to kind of weigh in on what they would like to see. Do we want to do a survey, an online survey? Do we not? Do we not think that's the most effective way to get public engagement? So conversations like that will occur, but we know for sure that we will be working with the steering committee, who will meet a number of times. I think it's 6 or 8 times over the course of the project. The consultants will maintain a project-specific website, so all of the materials and all of the decisions and all of the information that's going to be shared is going to be posted on that website. There's going to be a kickoff meeting with staff that's going to include some code diagnosis, and we're going to have up to 10 stakeholder interviews. Those, in some cases, it might just be one-on-one. In other cases, it might be as small groups. There's going to be a number of different public forums, meetings with the Planning Board of Adjustment and Town Council. And then there's going to be some testing meetings with members of our development community. So once the code draft is generally put together, they're going to actually test it on some sites and have some design professionals review that. So once the contract is approved, work begins in May and with a tentative completion adoption date of August of next year. And that's the update. And I failed to include a motion, but the suggested motion would just be to authorize a town manager to, it's in the packet. Thank you.
There was extensive materials in the packet. Questions from council members? Comments, concerns? If there's not, is there a motion to approve this contract? Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen.
I move to authorize the town manager to enter into the attached contract with Code Red Planners LLC for their assistance with a comprehensive development code update.
Second.
Any further discussion? Madam Town Clerk, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Bowen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
and Young.
Yes.
All right, you're still with us. We're loving it. Thank you very much. It's approved. Good job. Next is a discussion and public hearing on consideration of ordinance 2025-03, a request for approval of a comprehensive update to Chapter 14 of the Town of Woodfin's Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to also take this opportunity to thank our planning director, Ricky Hurley, who's on vacation this week. So I'm actually filling in for him, but he did a lot of work on this as well. And so I'm just want to acknowledge that. So the summary of the request is a comprehensive update, as the mayor mentioned, to the Town of Woodfin's Code of Ordinances for Chapter 14 Flood Damage Prevention Standards, and that is Ordinance 2025-03 in your packet. So when we talk about floodplain regulation or flood damage prevention, all of those things, more or less talking about the same thing, I think it's helpful to understand, and we'll use a couple illustrations to discuss what are we talking about when we talk about flood damage prevention. What areas of our community are being regulated in this manner? Where does it apply? Why does it apply? How does it work? So this illustration comes from another community, but I think it does a very good job of showing you a cross section of what we're talking about when we talk about a floodway, a floodplain, and the flood fringe. So beginning at the very bottom where you see the words channel, that is, if you can imagine looking at a cross section of the French Broad River or any stream or any regulated water body, you would have normal conditions. Sort of when the water levels are normal, that's that dark blue. And as you experience different rain events and all of that water enters the watershed, it starts to swell the water in the river channel, and it kind of starts to creep up those banks. And so that starts to kind of rise into what we call the regulated floodplain. The dash line, the first dash line, that lowest dash line, is what we call the base flood elevation before we encroach into the floodplain. So that is what is a 100-year event. So if you had a 100-year event, that is the surface water level of that 100-year event. And if you take that line and you extrapolate it out horizontally, it's going to go to the edges of that hatched area on the sides. That is what we call the flood fringe. So the blue is the floodway. No development occurs in the floodway. The hatched is the flood fringe, and you can have development in the flood fringe, but that's what these flood damage prevention standards are designed to address. So those projects have to meet these development requirements. And then the regulated floodway combined with that flood fringe is the 100-year floodplain. So as Mr. Bryan mentioned earlier, there's a 1% annual chance of an event like that happening any given year. Going beyond that, you get into the 500-year floodplain, that 0.2% annual chance. And that is when you get a foot above, that is mapped by a foot. So having that much more water in your river channel, and then extrapolating that line out horizontally to those edges is that 500-year floodplain. When you look at it in cross section, it looks very symmetrical and very even. It is not. So when you look at it in plan view, you can see it starts to kind of take on this amorphous shape. And so I just plucked one particular parcel, and you see the kind of crude outline with the hatching. That is a building. It's a little bit hard to see through the color of the flood layers, but that is a building that is located on that particular parcel. And it's a little hard to tell. These are sort of GIS colors, so I can't modify them, but it's a little bit hard to tell. But there's a darker blue that represents the regulated floodway. That's the area where no development can occur. And then there's a lighter blue on the edges, and that represents the flood fringe. So again, those two blues together make up that 100-year floodplain. And then the blue with the green makes the 500-year floodplain. Now, we do not regulate development in the 500-year floodplain, but it's a good information to have. And you can see, I don't think it's by accident that that building is kind of tucked in the only spot that is green on that particular piece of property. So whoever cited that building probably referenced these maps and was strategic in saying, I want to minimize the likelihood of this building ever being damaged by flood. So I'm going to put it as far away from the flood fringe as I can. And by doing that, it also keeps them out of having to comply with these flood damage prevention standards. So if you're not in the flood fringe, if you're not in that 100-year floodplain, you don't have to worry about these standards. Is there any questions on that before I move on?
Is that building anonymous?
I'm sorry?
Is that building anonymous?
It's the UNC warehouse building, yeah.
I guess it didn't flood.
Yeah, and it didn't flood. So when we tackled looking at the standards, there is a state model ordinance, and our existing ordinance is largely modeled on the old model ordinance. So it was time for us to update that. We could have waited for the comprehensive code update and fold that into that work, but we felt that this was too important to wait, and we wanted to go ahead and move forward on updating those standards. We may even reconsider and re-examine some of those standards when we get to that point in the code update process. So this isn't necessarily the only bite at the apple. There will be other opportunity to look at our development requirements. But the large majority of the proposed changes are not substantive in nature. They are just more or less making our current ordinance more consistent with the model ordinance, and it's a lot of updated definitions, some reorganized language, some clarifications in the language, and some other changes, but that are really not substantive in that they were already largely interpreted that way, but they just made it more clear in the model ordinance. But there were 4 that we consider more substantive, and we did spend more time studying these 4 particular standards. So those 4 standards include what we call freeboard. And freeboard is the distance above base flood elevation. So if you remember that illustration with the dashed line that goes out to the 100-year floodplain. So that's your base flood elevation. And freeboard is the distance above base flood elevation that you build your first occupiable level. So it's commonly referred to as like the elevation requirement. So it's what you have to elevate your building to keep it out of risk of being damaged by flood. We also looked at what's called the substantial improvement threshold. So flood requirements do not kick in until, if you're doing a renovation of a building, it doesn't kick in until you reach 50% or more of the current tax assessed value of the building. So just for simple math, you have a $500,000 building or a tax assessed value is $500,000. It's damaged in the flood. You want to renovate it. If you can keep your renovation costs under $250,000, you do not trigger at least most of these development requirements. If you go over 50,000, that's considered substantial improvement. Excuse me, 50,000, 250,000 in my example. Over 50%, that's considered substantial. And at that point, they do expect you to comply. Combined with the substantial improvement threshold is what is the substantial improvement look back period. Currently, we only look at 1 year. So if somebody comes in today and says, my building's been damaged, I want to renovate it, we just look and see in the last year, have they done any other renovations? So if earlier that year they did a $50,000 renovation, we would add it to the cost of the new renovation and combine that to determine whether or not they've exceeded that 50% threshold. And then lastly, do you allow fill within the flood fringe? Currently, fill is allowed. So those are our existing standards. 2 feet above BFE, a 50% substantial improvement threshold, and a look-back period of 1 year, and we allow fill. So we're proposing 2 changes to those 4 standards. The first is to change the freeboard standard from 2 feet to 4 feet. This, we know, based on this event, that 2 feet was nowhere near enough for many buildings south of us. And, you know, in the Asheville area, River Arts District, and other areas south of us, much more damage, 9 feet above BFE. There was no way that 2 feet was going to accomplish what it needed to accomplish. As you move north, because the French Broad River flows north, you know, we're downstream of all of this, and now the floodwaters have more room to kind of spread out. Some of it's probably even been absorbed. And so our damage was not as extensive. For the folks, we've surveyed all of the building owners who, along the French Broad River, who had structures that were 2 feet above BFE, and it barely was sufficient. I mean, they all reported that the water came right up to the threshold. So if we're going to continue to experience events like this, and with climate change and increased development and more impervious surfaces and faster runoff, it's not going to get better. It will only get worse. So we think that elevating or increasing that freeboard standard from 2 feet to 4 feet is prudent. We do, however, propose to maintain the substantial improvement threshold at 50%. Some communities are lowering it to 30%, making it harder to do a more significant renovation. 50% seems to be kind of the right balance for us. It gives a property owner enough room to make a repair without necessarily triggering full compliance. It's really when you have to do something very substantial or a very significant repair, or you just choose to do more, then the 50% isn't, you might exceed it. But we think that that is a pretty good number. But remember, your substantial improvement threshold is tied to that look-back period. So what we don't want necessarily is for people to do that renovation, wait a year, come back and do another 50% renovation, wait a year, come back and do another 50% renovation. It's a way to do a substantial improvement without triggering flood compliance. And that's not really the goal of the NFIP or our standards. And we do propose to continue to allow fill within the flood fringe. We actually started prohibiting with thinking that we were going to recommend prohibiting fill in the flood fringe. And it's just sort of intuitive. If you think about somebody getting in a bathtub, if you put a volume in a body of water, it's going to push that water up and out. And so fill effectively does that. However, after talking with this, about this with others, we realized that, first of all, the 100-year floodplain is designed to have maximum fill in the flood fringe, so that it shouldn't make a big difference. And also for certain renovations, improvements, or small buildings, having fill in your floodplain is just practical. And I'll just use an example of a restroom in our parks. Relatively small structure. We don't necessarily want to try to elevate that with plumbing and everything else coming in under the building. It's more practical to bring in some fill material and build on that fill. Some additional changes, not particularly substantive. We do update the listed flood zones. We add new and update existing definitions. We do clarify, this came from the model ordinance, to prohibit temperature-controlled areas below the lowest floor. So that's just making it clear that even if you say it's not occupiable, once you temperature control it, it effectively becomes occupiable. So we don't want to kind of go there. So you have to just keep it unfinished space or not temperature controlled. And then similarly, we would explicitly prohibit the conversion of space below the lowest floor into habitable space at any future time. And then we added some standards for above ground tanks and other structures involving chemicals and petroleum products. So when you look at those four sort of substantial, or the more substantial standards that we evaluated and the two proposed changes, there are some consequences to those kinds of changes. And depending on your perspective, if you're pro-development and you want as few barriers to business and development, growth and development, then some of these may be viewed as cons. But if your perspective is more about minimizing damage in the future and safeguarding and protecting the environment and allowing the river to do what it needs to do, then these may be viewed as pros. So we don't really label them pros and cons. We just call them considerations because it really kind of depends on your perspective. They're not inherently bad or good. It's just the result of these proposed changes. So the first is that an increase in the freeboard standard will help protect future buildings from flood damage. Just as I described, the buildings that were 2 feet BFE, you go to 4, they're just going to be safer. It just allows for a more severe event to not cause damage. But that same increase in the freeboard standard will render some of our existing conforming buildings non-conforming. Now, they're newer construction buildings, so the likelihood of these buildings wanting to do such a substantial renovation or expansion or improvement that 4-foot BFE gets triggered seems unlikely, at least not anytime in the near future. So I don't know if that has a very strong consequence on particularly in Woodfin, given our building stock. And any building that was non-conforming to 2 feet BFE, it's going to be non-conforming to 4 feet BFE. That doesn't change anything. So if you're a non-conforming building now, you elevate to 2 feet or 4 feet, I don't know if it makes a big difference. It really only impacts, I think it's fewer than 5 buildings that would conform today but not conform once these are adopted, or if they're adopted. It's also not always practical to elevate existing structures, which could limit the life and use of a building. So some of our non-conforming buildings, if they do want to try to do a significant renovation, and also given the use of the building, sometimes it's just not practical. If you're bringing in very large, heavy equipment or trash trucks or anything of that nature, it's not really practical to think you're going to elevate that warehouse or that service bay to, 6 feet or whatever it ends up being, 2 feet or 4 feet above BFE. It could also increase the cost of a building in a floodplain. So instead of 2 feet, it's 4 feet. So now you have additional material that could make changes to your ingress and egress in the building. So it's going to cause some increase in costs. I don't know if I could call those substantive increase or substantial increase, but there would be an increase. And the increase in the look back period could limit investment in buildings over time. If you know that they're going to look back over 5 years or 10 years, then maybe you'll be less likely to make that renovation. But this is a really important point that I should pause and emphasize, that is the nature of nonconformities. So nonconformities, we want them to go away slowly over time. So we make exceptions, we make rules for them to exist in their current state, even make modest improvements, but not necessarily to let them keep going and going and going, particularly in a case like this where you're putting people and businesses and structures in harm's way. And then lastly, statutory exceptions do exist for designated historic buildings. So for our historic structures that are designated historic structures, so they're a national landmark, or they're a local landmark, or they're in a nationally recognized historic district, or a contributing structure to a nationally recognized historic district, then there are these exceptions that keep them from having to do full compliance. So this proposed update was reviewed by the Woodfin Planning Board of Adjustment at their April 1st meeting, and it was voted unanimously. They voted to approve it unanimously 5-0. And that is our staff recommendation as well. We concur with the Planning Board of Adjustment and do recommend adoption as proposed. But of course, council is welcome and able to amend any of those particular standards. And that leads us to the public hearing. So if there aren't any other questions from council, then we can open up and hear from members of the public.
The materials in the packet were extensive. Did any council members have questions for staff before we have the public hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we will now have the public hearing on this matter. It is 6:26 and we'll open the public hearing. No one signed up, but we will be flexible and allow anybody in attendance that might want to speak. Again, this is the public hearing on request for approval of comprehensive update to our flood damage prevention ordinance. And I won't do Ferris Bueller, but anyone? All right. Since no one has chosen to speak at the public hearing, we'll close it at 6:27 p.m. Council members, as you know, we've now had, is there any more discussion, or if not, the chair is open to a motion.
Point out one thing, this is another big ordinance change. This is probably the last one that I had on the docket of things I was hoping we could do in terms of environmental protection regulations, and I'm glad we were able to get it in before I depart. I think I just want to call attention to the look back period of 10 years related to storm events. That should, and I think it's worth saying this explicitly so that people do start thinking about this, is that if you have a non-conforming building now, you could go ahead and repair a building that was damaged in Helene. But from this point forward, you should, if you're a rational person, begin thinking about the fact that if you have a building in a place where a building shouldn't be because of how close it is to the river, if you have 2 storm events within 10 years, you are not going to be able to recoup any of your investment into that building. So it should provoke people to think long and hard about whether it is a rational decision to maintain buildings in the same locations that they've been, as close to the river as they've been. I hope that happens.
And thank you for pointing. I realized in my presentation, I kind of skipped over the 10-year when related to flood events. So we're proposing to change it from 1 year to 5 for any renovation. So you just want to change out the windows because you want better windows, not related to a flood event. We look in a 5-year period or any other similar renovation. But if it's flood related, we look over a 10-year period.
And obviously, compared to the city of Asheville, we have a small number of properties that might be affected. Other questions, comments? If not, the chair will entertain the motion. Are you going to do it, Councilmember?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the proposed amendment and find that it is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the Woodfin Together comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community in that the request, one, balances the supply of land for housing and employment and protects land for economic development and ensures an adequate supply of appropriately located and sized employment spaces. Two, makes government decision-making accessible and transparent to all residents while updating development standards to minimize risk from new development. Three, protects floodplains, wetlands, wildlife habitats, and other environmentally valuable and sensitive areas by updating development standards to minimize the risk from new development and educating the public on risks and actions needed to protect themselves.
That's it.
That's it.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask the town clerk to call the roll for the vote.
Owen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Morton,
Yes.
and Young. Yes.
Unanimous. Great job from the staff. Thank you. And thank Ricky, please. Next item is public hearing consideration of ordinance 2025-04, a request to conditionally rezone 11 1/4 acres located at 215 Macedonia Road and Mayapple Bridge Road from Mountain Village to Mountain Village conditional zoning, which would be MV-CZ. The properties are identified in the Buncombe County tax record as portions of pins 9721-23-4787 and 9721-43-6677. The applicant is Red Tree Organization LLC on behalf of property owners, the Bridges at French Broad LLC and Olivet Development LLC. Shannon, you'll present the staff report.
Thank you again. Sorry, it's me again, filling in for Ricky. But I'm happy to be here to kind of walk you through this particular conditional zoning request. As the mayor's indicated, for approximately 11.25 acres located off of Old Macedonia Road, and the rezoning is from the existing Mountain Village to Mountain Village Conditional Zone for the development of 61 townhome sites. So this rezoning is being triggered not to increase density or to ask for very specific or large exceptions from our development standards, but rather it's purely the size of the project that is triggering this conditional zoning application. So looking at the Exhibit A map, we have two parcels that are impacted, but the development is not across the entire parcels. It's just portions of those two parcels. It's that 11.25 acres. So you can see these areas that are shaded in gray. Those are the subject properties, but only a portion of that is going to be rezoned. That will end up looking like that hatched area. If you were to look at the zoning map, if this project were to be approved, we would change the zoning to look at that would look like that MVCZ that you see on the lower side of the page. When we look at our future land use map, that is part of our, is part of our comprehensive plan, it is identified as cluster residential, and that is consistent with the Mountain Village. So you can see all of the Mountain Village and this whole side of the river is designated cluster residential. And the Mountain Village and the proposed townhome development is consistent with the description of cluster residential, so no change in the future land use map is required. So here you can see those two subject parcels with the aerial imagery. The property is largely undeveloped with some road infrastructure or pathway infrastructure included, but largely just either pasture land or old farm land or some treed areas. So here is that site plan with the 11.25 acres sort of outlined. So I wanted to kind of point out here, you can see the property lines. So I want to go back and kind of show you, if you look at the property line between those two parcels, it's kind of, this development would be sitting sort of in the middle of that property line with about a little more than half of it on the Old Macedonia side, that smaller parcel, and the other, third or 3/5 or whatever or 2/5 on the opposite side. So a little bit more better resolution in looking at the site plan, as we mentioned, this is for 61 townhome sites that would be located along a new public road that would be extended off of Old Macedonia Road. And eventually that public road will connect as future development it moves forward, future phases of development. That road will turn or connect to I think it's called the Olivet Crossing Parkway. That will eventually, it's sort of a spine road that kind of runs through the Olivet community. But within the townhome cluster, you've got that kind of main spine road, and then you've got a little sort of side road that also supports a number of units. There are a couple different building styles proposed. So you can kind of see in the footprints, I'm going to show you a couple images that will help give you a better idea of what we're looking at in terms of those building styles. But looking at the site plan, you can see along the proposed public road, you have the extension of water lines, which are marked in blue, sewer lines marked in green, and then stormwater infrastructure, which is marked in purple. So you can see we have two large stormwater devices. The most common form of these devices is a product called StormTech. It's usually buried underground. It captures all of that stormwater. It's all piped into that stormwater device. It holds that water and slowly releases it. So it's designed for a slow release, and it'll kind of release into the creek that is south of the property, but it's a slow release. There's also a couple retention ponds that would also hold some stormwater and allow for natural recharging of the water table in those areas. Also included in the site plan is a minimum of 30,500 square feet of open space. That is the minimum requirement. This plan will actually have more than 30,000 square feet of qualifying open space, but that is the condition in the associated project conditions. Here's a close-up of that plan just to kind of give you a little bit better visual. There is a combination, because of the topography, there is a combination of what we call walk-up units, so 3-story units that you have to walk up to the main level in, and then what we call walk-out units, where the front door you just walk out straight onto the street. So there's some difference. There's also clusters of 3, 4, 2, I think in some cases. So that has the potential to kind of be modified, but for a total not to exceed 61 units. So as the fine tuning of this plan occurs, there could be a little bit of shifting of those clusters, but more or less this is the plan that we can expect. Also included in the site plans and building plans is a landscape plan. For subdivisions, townhomes are considered a single family product, and sometimes people are surprised to hear that. And it's because it meets the building code requirements for a single family structure. They're often referred to as attached single family, and it's fee simple ownership. So you actually own the land. You've got a little property, you've got a little lot, might be smaller and narrower than what is a typical, single family lot, but it is a lot. It is considered a single family product. And for development of this, the only landscape requirements we apply are street trees. So along those public or private streets, we would have trees, and they're spaced on average 40 feet on center, but we do allow a little flexibility in the spacing of those trees just to kind of get around driveway entrances, utilities, other obstructions. So, but on average, you take the entire length of the road, you divide by 40, and it tells you how many trees are proposed on the plan. And those trees are shown on this plan of those little circles that are kind of next to the roads. I should also take this opportunity to mention throughout the project are sidewalks along all of the public roads. We don't have a lot of sidewalk in Woodfin. This development would be one of the first, and I think it's very appropriate given the density. So you have safe, clear walking surfaces and walking paths for the community. And then you can see some other community trails that kind of circle that southern portion of the development. And these trails eventually connect, or through their transportation system connects to the larger Olivet community. And any resident of Olivet will have access to the townhome development, and any resident of the townhome development has access to the larger Olivet transportation system as well, and open spaces. So here's some illustrations of those units. So here's your uphill walk up unit. So you can see the garage is kind of tucked underneath, and then you have to actually walk up to that first level. And you can see a floor plan there on the right. And then there's the example of the walkout. So because of the topography, and I'm not sure if these units have a third level that you just can't see, it's on the backside, or if this is just a two-story unit, and I'll let our developers who are here today clarify that, but that is kind of what we should be able to expect with this from a character standpoint. There are 2 requested modifications: the use of LED fixtures for streetlights. We will be changing this, our comprehensive code update, to make this the standard, and so people can stop asking for exceptions for LED lights, because that is the norm now. So I wouldn't consider that a very significant modification. It's just technically required. And then to increase the maximum spacing of trees. So it's not the same number of trees, if you planted them 40 feet on center, will be planted. It's just the spacing of those trees. We don't allow them typically to be closer than 15 feet, and we don't typically want them further than 60 feet apart. But because of the density of this project and the number of driveways and other obstructions, they need a little more flexibility to increase that spacing to 85 feet. This project was also reviewed by the Planning Board of Adjustment at their April 1st meeting and also received a unanimous vote of approval, 5-0. And staff, again, concurs with the Planning Board of Adjustment. We do recommend the conditional zoning, approving the conditional zoning request from Mountain Village to Mountain Village CZ, along with approval of the associated site and building plans, and subject to the conditions identified in the Exhibit D project conditions. Those were all included in your packets. I think that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions before we open the public hearing and invite our development partners to come up and speak on the project.
I'm assuming from the phrasing of the tree spacing condition that we're only increasing the maximum amount, we're not decreasing the minimum.
Correct.
Okay.
Other questions before the developer has a chance? Okay. Developers are present.
Yes. We have Scott Austin and Brandon from Red Tree Builders.
You wouldn't mind introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Brandon Bryant. I'm representing Red Tree Organization and a builder here in the area.
I'm Scott Austin, representing Olivet Development. Thank you all for having us.
Anything you'd like to add that the staff report didn't have? Anything notable for council?
I would say the last couple of meetings, we've kind of gone over it. What we've listened to in meetings with folks in the room, as well as with community. Traffic, I think traffic for us seems to be the largest thing of concern, and will continue to be as we grow and as Woodfin grows in particular. Our goal is to always work to mitigate traffic. When we started construction of Olivet, the intention was always to grow Olivet. And what we have done to start out our project was build individual lots, sell those individual lots to homeowners who then found their architect, found their own builder. What that creates is a lot of traffic. So this is the natural progression for us to limit the amount of individual sales to builders to now coming in and having development partners. So we can mitigate that traffic. We can control who's coming in, what construction entrance. We can control when they're coming, how they're coming, where they're parking, where our laydown yards are. So our intention is to do what we can to increase our ability to control that parking. So I think that's been our biggest, I would say, concern as we move into this. We have 3 areas to come in and out of Olivet right now, one on Westridge, one on the Johnson Road exit, and our main entrance. And we're working with the town, or will work with the town, for traffic calming measures. We have to deal with the state road coming in, so we certainly can't make any representations there, but it's certainly in the forefront for us. The intention for the development, when we started Olivet, we were $185 a square foot to build 10 years ago. And when we sat down, we said, we're going to be here for the long haul. And it will take maturations of these plans. It will take standing up in front of this room and just talking with everybody, saying, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's why. We're trying to bring families. We're trying to bring more people into Olivet. We're trying to open up our net. When we talk about attainability, we'd love to continue to bring our prices down, but we're limited. We've spent a considerable amount of money bringing the sewer into the project to allow for this type of a development, so we can cluster these around. So we're not left with 2.5, 3.5, 4 acres of kind of homes that you don't know your neighbors. The intention is to build a community where you know one another, you see one another. And this is the next maturation of that process.
I have two questions. Will you phase this over a period of time? 2 phases, 3 phases?
Yeah, I think we're looking at 3 phases.
And if you had units, the average unit ready today, approximate sale price?
I think we're going to look at about 850,000. Just piggybacking off your comment in the presentation earlier, we will be doing the green certification, and they will be modular as well. So you've seen the renderings they'll be done as modular for the exact reasons they shared. So I won't give any more to that because that was a good presentation.
Sorry, I just realized a couple things, and I should have mentioned the green building component. That's a very significant part of this project. So there will be solar on these units, and we do expect these to be better than net zero, I think.
That's our hope.
That's the goal. So nice feature for units like this. Also, from a traffic standpoint, so what Mr. Austin has referred to is managing the construction traffic, but from just a regular traffic standpoint, we do not require traffic impact studies unless the proposed development is expected to exceed 200 trips in the peak hour or 2,000 trips in a day. And this project trips neither, even including the development that has already been done. It's something like 70 trips in the peak hour, 700 trips during the day. So it's nowhere near triggering that. It could be possible in subsequent phases that a traffic impact study would be required, but for now, it's not.
Questions from council members?
Yes, when you're talking about 3 phases, as the mayor asked, what are those phases?
I think you could just look at, roughly 2020 and 22.
Okay.
Kind of evenly split, with some of the land that we're using for phase 2 to be used as a laydown yard and expansive area down that ridge that would allow us to really create an area for folks to get off the road.
I know you probably can't commit to the better than net zero. You won't know that until it's built out, but I think I understood that your intention is to place solar on top of every single unit. Is that?
That is the intention, yeah. And the net positive, which is the right term for that, would be adding battery to it. So we're exploring that. So that is our goal, to add battery, but we also want to keep that price point at a point with everything else that's happening right now with tariffs and all that. So I'm keeping my eye on that as well.
But the solar panels are in, it's just a question on the battery.
Yeah.
Then would you be open to just having an added condition saying that each unit will be constructed with rooftop solar?
I don't want to speak for the builder, but I'd also like the ability to perhaps not have it on the roof. Like if for some reason you need it somewhere else, whether parking is a requirement there.
I would say that the HOA documents is going to require us to meet those green building guidelines as well.
So on having solar facilities for each unit, would that then address the rooftop concern? He's phrasing it as each unit will have.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, of course.
My thought there is that if you have, everybody's going to have a solar facility, you're going to get to the type of amount of solar that is being described here, because it doesn't make sense to put up one solar panel and all the electrical for that. So they should have a decent amount of solar. So I think that gets us to a level of assurance that this really is going to be the green community of townhomes that we're hearing about.
I think the only hesitancy I have on your behalf is that not every rooftop is going to have the ideal sun-facing orientation.
And I think that's the point. How, do we get it? Do we move those to a parking area or to a field or to an area where it's a shared spot? And I think that happens within the solar orientation.
But I do support what Eric is requesting.
Other questions from council? Remind us again, how many residences are now at Olivet?
Oh heavens, we're right now we have 103 people paying into the HOA.
Okay.
And at any given time, we have between 2 and 20 houses under construction. So this will really allow us to streamline where we're headed and move past the single family development for the moment and focus on these, kind of pivot where we were headed.
If there are no other questions, we will have a public hearing. I'm going to open this public hearing at 6:49 PM. We did have Amy Miller sign up to speak. If you'd come to the microphone, please, and just tell us where you live.
Hi, I'm Amy Miller. I live at 34 Tulip Poplar Trail in Olivet. I have always known that Olivet intended to do townhouses of some sort since I moved in. I'm delighted that they've been able to maybe figure out a way to do that. My concern is the density. I know at the zoning meeting, they said they didn't require a traffic study, but I would urge this council to consider that Olivet is in the beginning of their development. They have 400 and something acres, whatever that is. And if we start doing super dense now, the only roads in and the only roads out, that's a lot of people coming and going. So even though it technically was shy of needing the traffic study, if we consider that the goal of Olivet, which, you know, they developed one side and then the other side and are sort of filling in the middle, if we are now doing density of 61 townhomes in 11 acres, what's next, what's next, what's next? I want you to consider the greater picture for Olivet and the families that live at Olivet, and not this little piece of what they're presenting right now. So I would urge the council to consider a lower density, but approve townhomes. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak that did not perhaps sign up? Last chance to speak on this request to conditionally rezone 11 1/4 acres and allow for the development of 61 townhomes. If not, I'll close this public hearing at 6:51 PM. Council, you've heard the presentations. The document was significant, substantive. You heard one additional condition suggested by Councilmember Edgerton. Are there others? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Right, I'll make that motion.
Your last time.
The last one.
Blaze of glory.
I move to approve the proposed site plan and conditional zoning of 11.25 acres shown as exhibits A and E from, that should be A through E? No, exhibits A and E.
We only include A&E in the ordinance.
From Mountain Village to Mountain Village conditional zone, subject to the conditions identified in the Exhibit D project conditions and subject to the following additional condition, which I believe would be 21, stating that each of the 62 units will be constructed with incorporated photovoltaic or solar cell systems. And find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the Woodfin Together comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request, one, uses green and sustainable principles with distinct and human scale architectural design while forming complete communities, uses the future land use map to guide development decisions and connect existing and future activity centers with multimodal transportation for all users, extends or improves infrastructure needed to support residents and sustainable growth while promoting long-term fiscal responsibility by facilitating growth in areas with existing services. Balances the supply of land for housing and employment and protects land for economic development. Protects environmentally sensitive areas such as floodplains, wetlands, steep slopes, and areas adjacent to streams and creeks while also encouraging accessibility to green spaces.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion by council? All right, I'd ask the town clerk to call the roll for the vote, please.
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
and Young. Yes.
Thank you very much, Gina. And with that, it is approved. Thank you very much, Shannon. You've been on stage. Probably more than you wanted to. Next item of new business is a discussion of council about establishing committees and or task forces, depending on what we call them. Do you have an introduction of this?
I do. It's a short one. So As the mayor has indicated, this council has discussed the possibility of adding some additional boards, committees, commissions and that's very common in local government to help with certain policy decisions. What gets tricky is what you call them and kind of keeping the different kinds of boards and commissions clear. And just, you can characterize these differently, you can name them differently, but for the purposes of this discussion and try to create a common vocabulary, I've kind of named what I think are some of the 5 most common, which are mandated boards and commissions. So this is when the state statutes say you as a local government must have a body that will review certain kinds of applications or make certain kinds of decisions. In North Carolina, that's a planning board and a board of adjustment. In Woodfin, we combine them into one single body, the Planning Board of Adjustment. That's the PBOA. Advisory boards, commissions, or committees. We have an example of that in Woodfin as well. That's our Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee. Both of these are standing committees, meaning they meet every month or every other month. They meet on a regular schedule. Then we have council subcommittees, and we have a couple examples of these. We have both an ad hoc committee, which is the Landscape and Open Space Committee that should be wrapping up their work in May, as I mentioned earlier. And then we have the performance plan, which is really a standing committee, but they don't necessarily meet every month, and but it will resume every year. And these council subcommittees are exactly what they sound like. It's a subcommittee of this council. So 2 or 3 members of this council make up that committee. And then we have task force. And I think a lot of when we talk about, especially ad hoc advisory bodies, we're really talking about task forces, which typically meet to research or investigate a particular issue or topic. And it can be of mixed membership. So you can have outside members in the community, you can have people with particular expertise in the community, as well as council members, or not have any council members. And then lastly, you have steering committees, which are typically formed for the purpose of helping to guide a particular project. So an example of that was completed last year was the Town Hall feasibility study, and we're forming a steering committee for our comprehensive code update. So that's another example. When forming these boards, commissions, or committees, you want to ask yourself some questions, like to help you understand which of these kinds of committees is appropriate for the issue that you're investigating. Our council has discussed forming 3 new committees: a communications committee, community partners committee, and a water infrastructure committee. And there's more to all 3 of these, but just those are sort of the simple titles that we've assigned them. So what needs to be identified is this a standing committee or a time-limited, or sometimes referred to as an ad hoc committee? So is this a committee that's going to meet on a regular basis for some undefined period of time? Or are we going to say, we're only going to meet until this particular issue is investigated thoroughly and we feel satisfied, and then we will stop meeting? Is it a council subcommittee or a task force? I think we know that none of these they're not a mandated committee, and they're probably not a standing advisory committee. I think these all probably have limited, maybe not communications, maybe that's a standing committee. But for the most part, they're time limited, and so they're probably a council subcommittee or a task force. Who will the council appointees be to these bodies? That's another question that needs to be answered. And if it's a task force, who appoints the members? Task forces are often recruited. Membership of a task force may be recruited. It may be recruited from members of the committee because they know somebody who has particular expertise that they think would be particularly helpful. It may be appointed by council through an application process. It could be appointed by one of your other standing boards or commissions. So there's a few things that need to be explored there. So that's just my quick introduction. I will let council kind of discuss how they want to proceed with each of these. But just to kind of give you a preview, I tried to kind of set up the motions to first establish the committee, identifying whether it's standing or ad hoc, and then whether it's a council subcommittee or a task force, and then who the membership will be appointed by.
Go back though and leave that slide open if you would, please. Okay, folks, we've talked for some time about this. This is really a great move forward, the fact that we're even discussing this. And are we agreed that those three are the three that we want to consider tackling right now?
I agree.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right. Let's see if we can, for all three of them, are they going to be, any of those need to be standing permanent, or can they all be time limited?
I can give you my opinion on the communications.
Please.
And actually, Shannon, could go to the motion, just because it'll flow a little easier. I'm going to suggest, and I've talked with the relevant people, that this be a standing committee. It's going to be a council subcommittee for communications, and the council would appoint members, and they've already, in theory, agreed, subject to the approval of the council. Council persons Thornton, Irvin, Young, and myself, and I will be acting as the chair, which I guess means I get to take notes. But that would be just not to accelerate the conversation.
No, this is
certainly we could discuss it more. I think that makes sense, and the only thing I would add is I think it should be a standing committee, because I think this work will go on for a while, and we're going to have check-ins with Shannon and whatever staff members need to be done over the term of it, and it'll be a lot of different projects. So making it an ad hoc, it may eventually become unnecessary, but I think it's a long-term committee.
Yeah, I think of the three, that's the one that makes the most sense to be standing.
And
So
only council members as members.
at
In
the
this
moment,
case.
that's all I've thought about.
Yeah.
But that's
I
a
agree.
good discussion point. But I think,
Who do you foresee as being the staff support person for this?
well, our contact will be Shannon.
Or is it TBD?
I think maybe TBD.
Okay,
And I think it's okay, like you may have committees where you have your members, in this case, it will be a council subcommittee, but there may be an expert in the community that you invite in for a particular meeting to share some information. So I think it's not limiting you to have no outside input. It's just the membership and the decisions and the recommendations come from those members.
I think having, it's sort of a large committee and a subcommittee in this sense, but I think there's enough work to have. I'm delighted that I have 3 people who want to join me in this process. So unless there's an
Can I
objection.
mention one brief thing
Please.
of caution for a 4 council member committee,
exactly.
which is fine. You can do that. It's going to have to keep in mind that it is a committee of,
Yes.
of the council, and because you have a quorum of the council president. And it's going to have to stay focused only on the things. I mean, it's still a public body, so it has to announce its meetings.
Right.
It's going to stick to the purpose of those meetings. Don't consider full-on council business when you're meeting with that committee, because then you theoretically have breached the open meetings law by having an unannounced meeting of the council.
Sure.
No, I appreciate the caution, and we're aware of that, and we'll comply. In order to just get this out of the way, I'm happy to make the motion at this time if
Other
that's
comments,
okay.
questions before you do that? Okay.
Okay. I move to establish a new standing communications committee that is a council subcommittee, membership to be appointed by the council. And I move to appoint Hazel Thornton, Betsy Irvin, Johanna Young, and myself, Ken Kahn, to serve on the communications committee.
There's a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion, I'd ask the town clerk to call the roll, please. Oh, hang on. Johanna, any comments, questions from you? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Proceed, Ms. Powers.
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Irvin,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Thornton,
Yes.
and Young. Yes.
Great. Good start. Would you go back a slide, please? Shannon.
Thank you.
I'm happy to.
Go next.
Motion that infrastructure, water infrastructure.
Okay.
Shannon will pull that up. So I'm going to move to establish a new ad hoc committee, advisory committee, water infrastructure committee that includes myself, Betsy Irvin, and Johanna Young. and Shannon has agreed to be the staff member.
Just a question on that. This is obviously not my issue, but I'll butt out after this. But do you want to specify when for the ad hoc ones, what event will trigger the termination? And I just say that because I've watched boards be created and then just left for 20 years and then nobody knows.
I thought about that. At this point, I prefer not to. I have no interest in having a standing committee, but I don't really know at this point what date or document would trigger termination. But I have no interest in a standing committee.
Okay.
And did I hear Cohen, Irvin, Young? Were those the three members?
Yes.
And do you foresee members of the community being on this subcommittee? Task force or subcommittee?
Task force.
Task force.
Okay.
It's possible we've not reached that decision.
If you do include members of the community, how would they be selected
Appointed by the council members.
that are on the task force? Okay. Is that
Yes, I
sufficient for
can't
that?
read the
No.
complete sentence.
Is that sufficient, John, for this? Okay. Anybody else? Johanna, comments, questions?
No comments.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Well, do we need?
Well, we do need
I'll
a second.
second it.
And we're clear on the motion, okay? Go ahead, Johanna.
No, if he needed a second, I was saying I was second.
Okay. We'll let you be the second since you're sitting right there on the black box. Town Clerk, would you please call the roll on this motion?
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Irvin,
Yes.
Han,
Yes.
Morton,
Yes.
and Young. Yes.
Great. Number 2 is approved. Shannon, if you'd go back a slide. If I may, I'd like to propose that a community partners task force to be time limited, to be decided at a future date. And if you'd go up one slide, Shannon, go forward. Be established, again, an ad hoc
Sorry.
for community partners with membership, and I propose myself as the chair, and I'd like to ask Phil Cohen to join me as the council member on that. There would be membership from the community by invitation as well as application, and a potential co-chair from a key stakeholder in the community. My wish would be that Sherry Powers could be the staff person to support this task force. Thoughts? Obviously, there is an organization behind this that we don't want to go public with yet that has approached us about being a partner with us. That would obviously be our first topic to consider. But until we establish this as formal and get their board to formally approve it, I'd like to keep it at that, if that's okay with council.
Certainly.
Questions, comments, concerns? John?
I should ask this before, but for all three, are you all intending that these are all three of them are going to be advisory boards that report back to council and then council takes any final action?
Yes.
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 Okay.
And
Yes.
again, this would be a task force. It would be time limited to be determined at a later date.
Council hasn't, other than study these areas, the council hasn't granted any authority
Exactly.
to make any decisions.
The purpose of this to be gather information, get ideas, recommendations, and come back to council.
Right.
And by having a staff member advise us and guide us, we really think we can make some good things happen.
If I could just make one friendly recommendation or request, and that rather naming Sherry Powers as liaison is maybe staff, depending on workload. So it might be, in some cases, it might be our planning director, some cases it might be Sherry, but maybe for the two of them to
I'm
support
okay
that?
with of course, exactly. And given the specific motivation behind this one would not begin its work until well into the summer, if that makes a difference. So that's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, final questions?
No, sir.
If not, Ms. Powers, would you call the roll?
Cohen,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Urban,
Yes.
Khan,
Yes.
Horton,
Yes.
and Young.
Yes.
I have to tell you, serving for 3 years and starting with Hazel and Eric, I think these are a big step forward. I think they'll help the town grow and they'll establish more a sense of community as much or more so than anything we've done. Okay, there's one last item. It's called property donation discussion. This was motivated, we have had a few residents of town, specifically property owners, approach us to ask, what if we wanted to donate the land, the property to the town? What if we wanted it to be affordable housing? And we actually had a resident of Asheville who lives very close to Woodfin, who has actually entered into a partnership with the town. His estate, part of his estate will come to the town of Woodfin General Fund with some specific activities tied to it. That triggered me to go into the community and have more discussions with community members and community leaders that own land, and they have houses that are sitting vacant that they've done nothing with. They don't want to be a landlord, or make this one up. Their grandparent is in assisted living, and they know that in the next few years they're going to want to do something with the property. I'd like for us to be able to, all of us on council, to be able to talk to residents and encourage them to have the discussion, with the goal being that we would introduce them to primarily a nonprofit, a local nonprofit partner, even the one that we've set up a relationship in the past. We wouldn't be doing a transaction. All we would be doing is making introductions. And John came up with the concern that we really need some kind of disclaimer to protect ourselves. And if that's a worthy introduction, I'll let you take it
Yes,
from
sir,
there.
it is. I mean, so my concern is just thinking about what the town's role would be in a particularly facilitating, let alone ownership of a piece of property that then you would have somebody else come into some kind of ownership or other occupation of later. Even just facilitating the transfer of it from donor to donee and what they're going to do with it. I would want to make crystal clear that you don't own it, you haven't owned it, you don't know anything about it, you're not expressing its fitness for purposes of any kind. And, for all, we just need to be, this is my instinct to protect you from any liability that could come out of it when you don't. There's a reason why there's a whole industry around property inspection and evaluation, phase 1 and phase 2, and everything you can do to make sure a piece of property's got a clean bill of health for somebody to live on it, that you won't have anything to do with if you're just trying to say, here, meet this nonprofit community partner that might help, affordable housing come into shape in the meeting. So in talking over that with the mayor, I didn't want to hand you all a disclaimer sort of thing that made it sound like I'm telling you need to do that until you tell us what kind of, program this is and that you want to see something.
Is developing something like this, can it be a single disclaimer? Is it difficult?
So, yeah, I think I said most of it just now.
Did you catch that, clerk?
And so we would not, as the town, not have the property donated to us. We would just act as the referral to a 501c3 or some other entity, just by saying, here's a thought, here's a possibility, let me introduce you to someone to have further discussions with the town not involved in.
And it's not to say that somebody who really intends to, I mean, you had the one lot in that subdivision, I can't remember the name of it.
Appalachian Way, yeah.
Sold is not really needed for town purposes, but it was, just a gift of an estate, and that's, not to say that would never happen, but particularly if it's to transition property from some ownership to some other, I really don't recommend you try to ever own it, and most try to facilitate the transfer to a nonprofit who would handle it.
But if there was someone that said, we have a lot, and would the town, could this be a community garden? There could be cases where council would want to consider that.
Yeah, and I think those are unique circumstances
Right.
that we can do on a one-off sort of
Yes.
basis. But if you want to have any sort of program that's going to be, any sort of programmatic thing, we want to have a healthy disclaimer.
I understand. There is one estate that has a property in Woodfin that they've reported to me that they hope that if they can get the liens cleared, that they would like for us to introduce them to someone that the family would really, they'd be honored if that could become a place for someone to live in that couldn't afford to live here otherwise. So that's what's been kind of my urgency behind it.
I was kind of concerned about us taking any active ownership role in it, but if I go back to our strategic initiatives that we approved last month, this falls pretty squarely within the number 2, promote affordable living, equity, and inclusion. So I think it's worth taking, whatever the next steps are. I don't know, but I wouldn't rule it out, certainly.
The next step would be town attorney drafting something and coming back to us at a future meeting for discussion and approval, along with town manager being involved in that. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Does anybody have an objective or objection per se, or?
What would the messaging be? So we would all make the same, that would be my concern. So we're not all out here doing something
We
different.
would all use the same disclaimer, that's for
We
sure.
would use the same disclaimer, but what would the messaging be and how do we get that out?
Shanna, would it be worth having that particular nonprofit partner come back and talk to us again in light of this?
I'd be happy to reach out, but I don't know if that partner would help with the messaging question.
Right.
But happy to reach out.
Well, I think maybe that's something we need to.
Maybe the communications subcommittee can.
Might be.
Yeah.
Might be.
Yeah.
Might be a good first task.
Yeah.
Somebody expresses an interest, what should we respond?
Yeah, what should we
I
say?
think
How
that's
should we, yeah.
It's a great idea, get started on
That
that.
might be our second task. We got one in the queue already.
Okay.
But yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Is everybody okay with that? With the communication subcommittee
Sure.
advising on a message?
Yes.
Johan, are you good with that?
I am.
Excellent.
Any other questions or concerns? If not, let's do a quick roll call of approving council guidance to the town attorney to proceed.
I think I've got consensus
Okay.
to bring something back to you.
Okay.
No, we don't need a formal.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. Thank you. Any other items to come before this council tonight? If not,
Can I
Yes,
mention
sir.
one thing? Because they've been very patient. Not that I'm doing your commercial work for you, but Carl and Mary, I think they brought some literature. So
Good.
if you want it, or even if you don't want it, take it.
I do want it.
We'll put it on our table outside so anybody
Okay.
can help
I just wanted
themselves.
to make sure
Okay,
everybody-
thank you all
everybody's
for
aware of it.
coming.
And thank you for coming.
anything else from a member of council or staff? If not, is there a need for an executive session for any reason tonight? Thank you, sir. Is there a motion to adjourn? Johanna, you want to make it?
I motion to adjourn.
And a second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Oh, yeah.
Cohen?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Urban?
Yes.
Han?
Yes.
Thornton?
Yes.
And Young?
Yes.
We are adjourned at 7:18 PM. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for this.
All right.
Thank
Man,
you.
we're gonna miss
Man, we're
you.
going to miss you.